I don't want you to turn your scriptures to the Gospel according to St. John, to the last chapter, chapter 21, and we shall read it together. Turn to John 21. In this chapter, John the Beloved has put together so many things together. Maybe that he was trying to summarize all that he wrote, or that he was trying to cut down a lengthy presentation, or probably that he wanted to put everything in a nutshell. It's a kind of jumbled up, if you look at it. Let's read John 21. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. And on this wise showed he himself. It's a kind of a gist, okay? Now he presents the proceeding. They were together Simon Peter, Thomas called Didymus, and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, that is James and John, and 2 other of his disciples, total 7. Simon Peter said unto them, I go a fishing. They said to him, we also go with thee. They went forth and entered into a ship immediately. And that night they caught nothing. But when the morning was now come, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. They lived with him for 3.5 years. And just because he was crucified and rose again, now even they are not able to recognize him. You see that? They did not know him, that it was Jesus. Then Jesus saith unto them, Children, have ye any meat? They answered him, No. And he said unto them, Cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. They cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. Professional fishers labored whole night and caught nothing. And now at the instance of Jesus, they cast the net on the right side, and the net was full. Therefore the disciple, they cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. Therefore the disciple whom Jesus loved said unto Peter, who was the disciple whom Jesus loved? John, the one who is writing. See the way he introduced himself. The disciple whom Jesus loved saith unto Peter, It is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fish's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. And the other disciples came in a little ship, for they were not far from land, but as it were 200 cubits, dragging the net with fishes. As soon as then as they were come to the land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid thereon, and bread. quotation marks around this verse. As soon as they were come to the land, they saw a fire of coals, barbecue. Okay? And they saw a fire of coals there and fish laid upon the fire and bread. Jesus said unto them, bring out the fish which ye have now caught. The fish was already there on the fire. I want you to note that. And now he says, bring the fish that you caught. Okay. Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes, and 153. And for all there were so many, yet was not the net broken. Are you able to follow? The wealth of fish that could have torn the net in pieces. And John is trying to tell us, so many fish, yet the net is not broken. Jesus said unto them, come and dine. The fish that they caught is not yet put on the fire. The bread was already ready. Come and dine. And one of the disciples, Judas, asked him, who art thou? Knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then cometh and taketh bread and giveth them, and fish likewise. This is now the third time that Jesus showed himself to his disciples. After that, he was risen from the dead. So when they had dined, Jesus said unto Simon Peter, now look at this conversation. 7 of them there, Jesus picks up Simon and addresses him and says, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? He saith unto him, yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, feed my lambs. He said to him again the second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? He saith unto him, yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, feed my sheep. He saith unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved, because he said unto him the third time in front of all those other disciples, lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus said unto him, feed my sheep. Verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou gavest thyself and walkest whither thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee, and carry thee whither thou wouldest not. A very strange presentation. This verse, although looks so confusing, is simply saying, Peter, when it is time for you, you are going to experience a death. And be prepared for it. This spake he, signifying by what death he should glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said unto him, follow me. Then Peter, turning about, seeth the disciple whom Jesus loved, second time, whom Jesus loved, following, which also leaned on his breast at supper on the upper room. See the emphasis. The one who he loved and the one who leaned on the breast in the upper room. It's kind of giving me an idea that Peter was feeling a little jay. You understand? Jealous. Okay. Which also leaned on his breast at supper and said, Lord, which is he that betrayed? Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, Lord, and what shall this man do? Now, that brings us to the text that we read for our scripture reading. Verse 22, Jesus said unto him, when Peter said, what shall this man do? He said, if I will that he tarry till I come. If I will that he should live till I come, that he be in good health till I come, that he should experience anything different than what you are anticipating. What is that to you? What is that to you? You just follow me. I'll stop there. Another 4 more verses, 5 more verses, but that's again, summing up what John wants to say. A number of thoughts presented here. A number of thoughts presented here. And that itself is the sermon that I could end with. That itself is the sermon. But then, just for a few moments, let us realize that we are living in a very competitive world. Everything that we want to do has to be better than somebody else what is doing. Everything that we have has to be better than somebody else's. And you must have heard this common saying in this country, keeping up with the Joneses. Have you? What does it mean? If he has a blue suit, well, I must go and get a blue suit for myself. If he has got a Cadillac, oh, I should go and get maybe a Lexus. Or at least a Cadillac. I remember living with a friend's family a few years ago. And this family had a beautiful house. And I was with them for quite some time. And they had a neighbor living just across the street. Another very good family. And this neighbor used to come and visit my friend's family very often, come and say hi, how are you, etc., etc. And then something interesting I noticed in this neighbor's family and what they did. If my friend's family brought a dozen rose plants and planted them in their front yard one day, the next day, this neighbor would have 2 dozen rose plants planted in the front yard. Interesting. And if my neighbor had some, these money plants, these hangings, they say, where you have the plant growing well, that you have a lot of money in your house. Have you heard that? If my friend had a few of these money plants hanging on one side of the house, this neighbor would have many such hanging on either side, both the sides of the house. And if my friend would have a shed at the back yard, the next day or the next 2 days, the neighbor would have another shed, maybe a foot or two longer and a foot or two taller. Competition. Competition that comes due to envy, jealousy, or rivalry. To be content and to be satisfied with what you have is of the old time religion. The present style is to have more and much more than anybody else. Is that true? The more I have, the much more I want to have. Yes, Irving Lutzer said this. He said, envy is rebellion against God's leading in the lives of His children. It is saying that God has no right to bless someone else more than me. That is envy. We often sing that song, count your blessings and name them one by one. Count your blessings and see what God has done. Have we sung that? Have you counted your blessings? Have I? I must have counted the blessings the other person has, just to make sure where I am in par with him. Count your blessings and see what God has done. Instead of counting your blessings, you would want to count the blessings others have. That may be the reason why perhaps Jesus made this striking statement. He said, remove the beam that is in your eye before you look at the speck in your neighbor's eye. Peter is a very good example for us to think of what we are talking this morning. Peter is mentioned about 39 times in this Gospel of John. And although Gospel of John, it has the focal point upon John himself, as the beloved, as the one who leaned on the breast and as the one who walked with him, and he also realized every time, everywhere Jesus went, that he had John, James, and Peter. So, while John was the focal point of this book, John, everywhere John was, Peter was. So, Peter is very much involved. Peter was a busybody when Andrew, his brother, called him to come and see Jesus. And as soon as Peter accepted that invitation and came to Jesus and followed him, he was so full of life, so joyful to do what Jesus wanted him to do. Once he followed, he was so excited, gung-ho about everything and about Jesus. He wanted to be very much involved and wanted to be first in everything that they were called to do. Peter was one of those three, James, John, and himself, who had amazing experiences with Jesus. Things that others did not experience, they experienced. The Mount of Transfiguration. Only these three were taken along with Jesus. And there they saw the glory of God and also heard his voice. What an amazing experience. Yes, every step that he went higher in his spiritual relationship with Jesus, the Bible tells us that he went down immediately and experienced a pitfall. That was Peter. That was Peter. The higher he went, sooner he came down. The mountaintop experiences became the foot of the mountain experiences for him. With all this, Peter was a special man. In fact, I like Peter more than any of the other disciples. My personal liking. Why? Simply because he was an outgoing man, he was an enthusiastic man, he was an open-minded man, he had a very strong will, and he was also a very impulsive person. He got involved in everything that came on his way. And because he was so open-minded, and because he was so transparent, he often fell into the trap of the devil. Well, you remember Peter wanting to walk on the water when he saw Jesus walking? He said, Lord, if it's you, command me that I come and walk on the water. And Jesus said, come. And you read in Matthew 14 chapter 28 verse, when Peter got down on the water, he happily walked. Recently I read about a pastor in Ethiopia or Nigeria, on the internet. He wanted to walk across a river on the water. You didn't read this? Well, maybe my phone is different to yours. Okay, I read it on my, whatever that news that comes in. This man, he announced and everything, and people gathered, and this man stepped into the water, and soon there were a couple of crocodiles who came and enjoyed him that day for breakfast. Peter got into the water. He walked, and as he walked, he was so happy, so jubilant, so enthusiastic. But he turned around to see what the others were doing in the ship. He wanted to see if they were feeling Jay, that he was the only one walking on the water. And you know what happened? He had to drown. A mountain of experience, walking on the water, soon he went down. Yes, you also remember the disciples, Jesus turning to the disciples and asking what they think of him. As recorded in the 16th chapter of Matthew, verses 15 and 16. Peter was the first one. He says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." A revelation, Jesus said, was given to him by God and none else. You are the Christ, the Son of living God. Shortly after that expression, shortly after that confession that Jesus is the Son of the living God, Jesus explained to these disciples, spoke to them and told them about the way that he is going to die and he is going to suffer. He told them about the crucifixion and all that lashing and spitting and all that would take place. And Peter could not bear it. So he takes Jesus to the side, maybe catches him on the shoulder and says, "Please come with me," and takes him to the side. He says, "Jesus, no, you cannot go through this. Please, you should not go through this experience." The Bible says Peter rebuked Jesus for what he was going to go through. Salvation is in the sanctuary and the cross, Brother Roger said this morning. Yes, that suffering Jesus had to endure so that you and I can be saved. And when Peter turned and told Jesus, "You cannot do this," you know what Jesus said? "Get thee behind me, Satan. Get thee behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me." Verse 23. A mountain of experience when he immediately turned and said, "You are the Son of God. You are Christ, the Son of living God." And with that experience, he suddenly plunges down where he has been called, "Satan, get thee behind me." Remember when Jesus told the disciples that they all would stumble and stray away when Jesus would be arrested. That they will all be scattered because of what Jesus would go through. What Peter said immediately? Matthew 26:33, he says, "Lord, if all these betray you, if all these go away from you, if all these stumble, I will not. I will not. I will stand by you. I will be with you." And then, what happened? That night, 3 times he denied Jesus. 3 times he denied Jesus. When the little girl turned to him and said, "Hey, you are one of the Galileans. You must have been with that man." He said, "Oh, no, I don't know what you're saying. I don't even know who he is." Another turned to him and said, "Hey, you are speaking the language of that man and his people." He says, "Maybe he must have changed his dialect." 3 times he denied Christ that night. Mountaintop experience. Immediate coming to the foot. And that Peter had to be restored. That Peter had to be restored. And so in the chapter that I have read, you saw where Jesus walks onto the shore where these men were fishing. And then there he lights fire with coals. I don't know where he got them from. Then he puts fish on the coals. I don't know where he got it from. Then he had the bread ready, and I don't know where he got it from. Heavenly provision. God who could give the children of Israel manna from heaven, he could bring food immediately on the instant. And when these disciples, tired and sleepless, almost nothing in their hands, whole night they tried. When they came, he comes to them and says, children, do you have any meat? And they say, none. They didn't know who he was. And then he says, well, cast the net on the right hand and you will have fish. And of course you have seen 153 long, big fish they caught and the net could have been broken. But then when they came, he says, come and dine. Come and dine. They had wonderful food, breakfast, prepared by the master chef. The best food probably ever given to them to eat. Okay, so Peter had to be restored after this meal. Jesus made sure that Peter would have an experience that will make him a changed man. An experience that would make him fit for what is ahead. Being with Jesus for 3.5 years and were promised to become the fishers of men. We read in the scripture that these men went into the Sea of Tiberias, and it was Peter who was the first one to turn and say, hey, I'm going fishing. Fishers of men, their job is different. Yes, they were fishers, fishing for the fish. But when Jesus called them and said, you will be fishers of men, their job description was different. And now, with the noble profession that was introduced to them, leave that aside and say, hey, I'm going fishing. And all of them say, yes, we will also go with you. And so they go fishing, professional fishermen, all their life they spend fishing and on the boats. The scripture tells us that they got nothing. They got nothing. Okay, this was a tremendous experience for each one of them, especially to Peter. When they went back to their old life, Jesus had to bring them back to the life that he had introduced to each one of them. 3.5 years they were fed and cared for by Jesus. There was no fishing during that time. There was no tax collecting during that time. They had nothing to do but to follow Jesus. He took care of them and provided them with everything that they needed. Yet they turned their backs and said, we are going fishing again. In asking them for fish and telling them to cast the net on the right-hand side once again, Jesus now opened their eyes to see that it was He, their Lord, whom they had forgotten and had forsaken. A restoration that they needed to know that they had to come back to their Lord, whom they forsook. Although they forsook Him, He did not. He even prepared them the breakfast from heavenly provision even before they caught any fish. Peter suddenly recognized. When the beloved disciple said, "It is the Lord," Peter immediately recognized that he was naked because he removed his clothes when he went back into his old profession. So he quickly grabbed his robe, put it on, and jumped into the sea. And I remembered, you remember those devils that were cast out from that man? And when Jesus turned and said, "Who are you?" They said, "We are a legion, we are many." And then Jesus permitted them to go into the swine. Remember the story? Where did the swine end up? They fell into the sea. Yes, my friends. When we go back into our old habits, when we go back into our old practices, when we go back into our old things that we have done, we end up in the sea. And that's where Peter landed.
Amen.
But then Jesus wanted to restore him along with us. He wanted Peter to be restored. And so that conversation that went between Jesus and Peter. "Peter, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these?" "Yes, Lord, I love you." It is a love that you know that we all share. It's a brotherly love. It is philios. You know I love you. Then, what did he say? "Feed my..." "Peter, son of Jonas, do you love me?" Second time. And he says, "Lord, you know the brotherly love that we all share. Yes, it's the philios. I love you. Tend my lambs." "Peter, the lovest thou me?" Third time. And Peter was annoyed. He was not alone. He had others around him. And why is Jesus picking on me? Me alone. What is the matter? 3 times he says, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" Peter forgot just a little while ago. 3 times in the front of others that he denied the Lord. He said, "I don't know who he is." Those 3 denials must be set right at this time by his 3 confessions. And the 3rd time, in his annoyance, he turned and said, "Lord, you know how much I love you. It is not just a brotherly love that I have, but it's the godly love, it's the agape love that I have." And when Peter realized that it was agape love, it's the godly love that Jesus was wanting him to experience, it was then that change came. Yes, with that change, we find Peter was told what he was going to experience. You know, I told you those verses 18 where he says, "You are going to experience a death that is going to be different. A death unlike the others. A death that will make you give your life for my sake." You know how Peter died? I was reading the death experience of all the disciples. Peter and Paul were executed in Rome by Nero, near about 64 AD. Paul was beheaded, and Peter was put on a cross. And when they were putting him on a cross, he said, "Hey, don't put me the way my Lord was put, in a standing position. Crucify me upside down. Crucify me upside down." That's how Peter gave up his life. And so Jesus wanted Peter to know the kind of death he was going to experience. And for that, Jesus had to remind him, "Peter, I died a death that is more cruel. And because I died that death not for myself but for you, would you be prepared to die for me the death that is set aside for you?" "Yes, Lord, I am ready. I will go where you want me to go." I will do what you want me to do. I will. Another mountaintop experience. I am ready to go where you want me to go. Yes, I will. But then, immediately his eyes fell on the beloved disciple who was sitting there. And his eyes fell on that disciple who leaned against the breast of Jesus in the upper room. And suddenly he remembered that disciple's mother coming to Jesus and said, Lord, when you come in the kingdom, will you please make sure that this one sits on the right side and this one sits on the left side, John on your right side and James on your left side, the sons of Zebedee. And Peter suddenly had a feeling of jealousy, envy, and he, for a moment, came all the way tumbling down from the mountaintop experience. And he said, Lord, I am ready. But what about him? What will be his experience? What about him? And then Jesus made this very striking statement. If I will that he be with me till I come alive, what is that to you? What is that to you? What will happen to him? You just follow me. Beloved, have you compared yourself with somebody? Have you thought about somebody else who became a hindrance in your spiritual experience? Has somebody been a stumbling block? Maybe a wife, maybe a husband, maybe a child, maybe your employer, maybe anybody around you. We often blame others as Adam did, Eve did, and all of us do, don't we? Not me, Lord, so and so. If somebody or something is a stumbling block in your Christian experience, in your spiritual walk, remember Peter. With all his mountaintop experiences, he often had those pitfalls because the devil is at work. And the devil will not spare you and me either. And when that happens, what we need to do? We restore. And the command is, you just don't worry about others, follow me. Follow me and do exactly what I want you to do. I don't know if you've seen the crabs. I go to the shop that's close by your house, super grand. And they have these fish area. They have crabs and all kinds of sea creatures. And sometimes I stand there and watch these crabs. It's very interesting. They never put a lid on the basket where the crabs are. Have you noticed that? You know what I'm talking about? The crabs? Okay. They don't put a lid on the basket where the crabs are kept. You know why? Every time a crab tries to climb, the other crabs catch it and pull it down. So they don't need a lid. And sometimes in our Christian experience, we are like that. We don't let others progress because we are jealous. A story is told for the little girl who is there for us. The story comes from the Greek legend, where an athletic race took place and the athletes took part in this race. The man that I'm thinking of ran the race, but he was placed number 2 in the position. He ran well, but still, a fraction of a second, he was put as number 2. This man was jealous of the one who won the race. The one who won the race was applauded, praised, and garlanded everything, and finally the city decided to make a statue of him and put it in the center and honor him. But this man who was 2 in the position, he was so jealous, he could not bear to see that statue standing there. He could not bear to see this man being praised. And so, this began to eat him up, And so, finally he decided that he would take a chisel and a hammer and go in the night in the darkness and slowly, undercover, sit at the base of the statue and chisel that away so that the foundation will become weak and the statue will fall and break up. So every night he went and did this, every night he went and did this, but one night he was so angry, he was so upset, seeing that statue standing there and thinking of that man who won the race. And he took the hammer and the chisel and went on banging so hard that the foundation shook and the statue fell. And it fell on the man who was chiseling it up. Envy is that. It kills you. It kills you. And Jesus wanted Peter not to be killed. And so he said, what is that? If somebody is having a special talent, somebody has a special blessing, what is that? You just follow. May God help each of us to follow him that way is like. Amen. Loving God, our holy, righteous, eternal Father, we thank you this afternoon for the message that you have given to us. That we should focus on you and you alone. Not be distracted by friends, family, situations. And do what you want us to do. Thank you for the life of Peter and for his experiences of joy and sorrow, which are examples for us today, that we too will be able to experience the joy that we can have by following you. Bless every head bowed, bless every family represented, and prepare us all for your kingdom. And finally, when Jesus comes to take us home, may it be our privilege to spend eternity with you. In Jesus' precious name we pray.